Hi, my name is Bria Kelly, this is Tina Gamble, and we're on Soundbites. We're here at Americano, the Americano, apologies, in Scottsdale, and
I am the executive sous chef and pastry chef here.
I met Tina in San Diego at your Rising Stars dinner.
At Bivouac Cider Works about, what was that, 3 years ago?
3 years ago. Where were you at that time?
So at that time, I had just left Whisk and Ladle, which was kind of my first major gig for like industry. I had just taken a position like that same week with Bivouac, and then we hopped right into my Rising Stars dinner. It wasn't something that I'd really done a whole lot of at the time.
Do you remember what you made?
I did a take on a caprese, and it was like chamomile macerated tomatoes and like pickled strawberries or pickled green strawberries. And then I think I did like a mozzarella mousse. When I was told like, oh, let's do 4 dessert courses.
So how did that come together?
I was like, I feel like that needs to be like a progression instead of just being like, let's go from a pork belly straight into dessert. That felt aggressive. So we kind of transitioned it with like slightly savory desserts to move into true dessert, if you will. I think I also did something with like peaches and like marigolds and like namlaka and all this other stuff.
I remember a lot of fresh flavors that I hadn't recognized. Like that was my first meal that had like chamomile in it, and I could recognize it, but I've never had it, which was really cool for me as the person experiencing the dish. You were in San Diego. We're now in Arizona. Tell us about how you basically, what's the time between then and now, I guess.
So I actually worked at Biv for a little over a year.
Okay.
My boyfriend had moved out here for schooling, moved out and took a couple random jobs here and there. I worked at a couple of the bigger hospitality groups out here for a little bit. I did cakes for a while.
Oh, nice.
I was doing like a lot of stuff that I hadn't really done.
A lot of new.
I feel like most of my career was very like restaurant based, and so getting into like bake shop was really different for me. Then about a year ago, I saw an ad for a pastry chef here.
Oh, really?
And
it's the old school way.
I was like, wow, an Indeed ad for a pastry chef.
That's the old school way.
I mean, let's see. It wasn't actually listed as the Americano. It was listed as private. And I put in my resume, and I got a text back from the exec chef at the time. Had me come in and interview and do a tasting, and I took the job officially last August, and I started as the pastry chef and then kind of moved into a bigger role as the executive sous.
So today you made us a beautiful dish. Can you tell me a little bit about like your process creatively from start to finish, or how you concept it, or what inspires you?
So the dish today was like, it was a Hōjicha milk chocolate mousse.
Delicious.
Our corporate executive chef came to me with some ingredient recommendations one day, and he's like, have you ever heard of halva? And I was like, of course I've heard of halva. He's like, you should put halva on a menu somewhere. And I was like, okay. And then a couple weeks later, he was like, have you heard of pandan? And I was like, of course I've heard of pandan. I'm Southeast Asian. I feel like the Hōjicha was a nice compliment. It gives like a malty sort of back end with the milk chocolate. So creatively, it kind of just started with these random ingredients that were kind of thrown my direction. Usually when I'm conceptualizing dishes, it's to replace other items on a menu.
Okay.
So like right now we have our chocolate tortino, which is like a play on a Black Forest. So I knew that I needed it to be chocolate. Hōjicha and milk chocolate work beautifully. I'm really big on like flavor pairing and nuance. Fernet is delicious.
Wild card.
It's a wild card.
Yeah.
I think it's unexpected, but it kind of like plays everything up. You pair it with some herbs, and it's just kind of, you get it all together, and it's like the perfect bite.
And the experience of eating that is, because if I can describe it, it's kind of it's a landscape, I think, of different textures and experiences, like as you combine different elements together. How did that become your, I guess, expression? Because I think that is consistent with your plating.
Whenever I create a dish, I'm very big on like the eatability of the dish, right? So like when I'm developing on a menu and I'm developing plate ups, it's all about like what's the ideal guest experience on this dish. And I feel like the things that I always look for in dessert, maybe as a professional, but I think even taking myself out of a professional point of view, is high texture contrast and like the melding of flavors. So when I plated this one, I think maybe even playing into like the fact that it's kind of Asian inspired, we were like, let's make it very like Zen, right? Like it's
perfect word for it, I would say.
Very progressive. Like we have the trio of chocolates around the Hōjicha mousse. Each one eats a little bit different, so you've got some progression there. And then the play on togarashi.
Yeah, the togarashi was a big pop for me.
It's really cool.
The
it's the puff barley, the fouilletine, the salt, the chilies. I like having that like harsh snap to kind of like counterbalance all the soft and chewy
That's the
textures.
memorable bite, right? The memorable bite is when you get that little pop and the crunch, and like when the salt like sweeps through your palate is like crazy. So that will move into
That is part of our fall menu lineup.
Okay,
so sweet. We will be moving into a fall menu. We're hoping by the end of September, which is really exciting. It's always a really exciting time to be developing something new and working on some new techniques and working out kinks and figuring out kind of what works and what doesn't. And all of that. It's a fun process, and the team is always really excited for it. Especially in a larger role of like executive sous, I feel like so much of my job is like administrative and day to day, and like all of this like managing all of the things.
Different.
It's different, and so when I can just kind of like zen out and do like some R&D and like work on some new stuff, it's like it's a really nice break.
Do you cook at home still, or a lot of chefs don't? Okay.
So I don't cook at home often. I never bake at home.
Okay.
If I get a request for like cookies or something, I'll hand somebody a recipe and be like, you can make them. It's okay. I'll answer any questions you have, but you're doing it.
Let me know if anything goes wrong.
Yeah. I'll troubleshoot your brownies when they come out. It's okay. I don't really bake at home.
Okay.
But I will I'll cook dinner on occasion, as long as I'm not here like crazy late. I'll usually like do some meal prep on my days off so that I have some meals for the week. So I have some sustenance besides like coffee and Red Bull.
Yeah, I heard about the coffee and Red Bull. She does before work. Is that how that is?
Sometimes, oftentimes, before, during. After. It's where like as a chef, everyone expects you to like cook these bomb meals at home.
No.
And it's like, no, I get home and I eat like a PB&J.
Absolutely.
And like
that's
some
actually
popcorn.
That's the common thread, I think.
It's like a PB&J and some water, because like you're dehydrated and you need some sustenance.
Or they're talking about like their partner has like made something for them and they're thankful for that.
100%. 100%.
Where does your inspiration come from? With that being said, if you don't have time to like work at home and you don't really do it outside of the kitchen, how do you get inspired like when you're starting from scratch?
I have always been really driven by like seasonality and like produce specifically, but also like sustainable local ingredients. Out here, where nothing grows because we're in the desert. I actually work with a specialty foods purveyor called Haifa Farms. He is awesome. He gets me a bunch of stuff. He forages his own mushrooms. He has family that goes and like picks wild huckleberries up in the mountains of like Washington. They're featured on our menu kind of all over the place right now. He'll send me like a list every week of like, this is what I've got, or like, this is what I can get you. And I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna use that as like a huge inspo source.
Yeah, it lends to the inspiration of things.
Exactly. So like sometimes he'll come in and he'll be like, so I got this really weird mushroom. And I'm like, cool, you wanna like drop me some? Like, let's see what it does. Like,
pull up.
Pull up. like, let's make something cool. Like right now we're looking at getting like candy cap mushrooms for fall. They come dried because apparently when they're fresh they are horrible. Like when they're dry they taste like maple syrup.
Oh.
When they're fresh they taste like rotten fish. It's
so there's
wild.
a whole transitional process in the drying.
Yeah.
Huh.
So we're looking at that for fall. We've found a lot of success working with smaller purveyors like Haifa. We work with a fish company out here called Chula, which they are actually in San Diego as well.
Oh, wow.
Produce-wise, we rely a lot on like specialty produce companies.
Yeah,
so
we have one of those in San Diego.
San Diego, San Diego has specialty produce, which I miss greatly. They have everything.
So places like a warehouse of things that you want in your life.
It's great.
As a creative and in culinary world, like it's just like
the fact they're open to the public too is fantastic. Yes. Out here we don't really have that, but we have like Peddlers and Sons, which is bigger. We also have Vesta, which is LA specialty.
Okay.
But they ship out from LA every day, so we get a lot of our produce that way. It gives us some access to some farmers market produce. Chef's Warehouse has been really good for that as well. They get us
large network of options and suppliers.
Exactly. I feel like when you're in a place like Phoenix, where it's not just a desert, but it's also kind of a food desert. Nothing grows out here. It's really hard to find stuff. It's finding places that can source from places like Flagstaff, which is a couple hours away. Or it's finding purveyors that can get you stuff from places like LA, like San Diego, where like everything is available to you at like the tip of your fingers at any time of the year. So I think it's been a learning curve, but it's been really important to really support that kind of network.
Is there something or an ingredient from Arizona in general that you've been introduced to by being here that you didn't have an experience with before?
Obviously, like I knew prickly pear was a thing, right? But I feel like in San Diego, you don't really see it places. I feel like in San Diego, like when I was growing up, like I would occasionally see it, but not everywhere. So I feel like out here, I've had crazy high exposure to it. Everyone uses it out here. Cactus in general is really widely used out here. Haifa actually introduced me to like these little chilies called chiltepins. And they're like
really hot.
They're so spicy, but they look like a thumbtack. They're so tiny. They're bright red. And the first time I saw one, I was like, I don't know what that is. But like you smell it and you're like, oh, that's spicy. See, I made the mistake of like smelling it first and being like, that smells kind of hot. And I like
bit into it.
Mistake. Don't do that.
Don't do that.
Don't do that. I don't think I could taste for like hours.
What do you expect for yourself moving forward?
So that's always kind of an interesting question for me because I didn't really expect to be sitting here as executive sous of the Americano in the first place.
But we're here now.
It was a little unexpected moving into it. I think I really just see myself continuing to like grow and establish, and like whether that's here or in California or in another state, new positions, new restaurants, whatever. For me, it's more about like continued personal growth. Onwards and upwards.
Onwards and upwards. Thanks, Tina.
Thanks,